In today's episode of Bowology 101, we'll be discussing the torsional rigidity of Asiatic bows. Note that although this is primarily about Asiatic bows, these methods and results should still apply to other types of bows as well. This video will consist of some background on torsional rigidity, followed by an explanation of the methods by which we assessed the torsional rigidity of the bows, and then finally a discussion of the results. Torsional rigidity is how resistant a bow limb is to twisting left and right. This is important due to it affecting how the bow reacts to torque. If you pluck the bow, then you apply a torque to it. A perfectly torsionally rigid bow would completely ignore the pluck and only travel straight forwards with no twisting. However, railroad bows rarely act like that. They always have some degree of flex to them. This is partly why manufacturers create things like carbon cores, which are significantly more resistant to twist than traditional wood or bamboo cores. Up until now, when we wanted to discuss the torsional rigidity of Asiatic bows, we would simply take a bow and try to flex the limb. This method is not repeatable, it is not accurate, nor is it possible for someone to accurately create a ranking of rigidity from this information. Building off of Jake Kaminsky's work in building a recurve bow testing jig, the ABD team has worked together to come up with a repeatable method of measuring torsional rigidity of bows, allowing us to compare how torsionally rigid any two bows are. Before we dive into the experimental setup, let's do a quick overview of the physics involved. When you pull a bow back, you are ideally applying a force directly back. However, in a real-world scenario, you are likely applying a non-zero degree of force sideways. This non-zero amount of sideways force introduces a force on the bow limbs, moving them towards one side. For simplicity's sake, we have that the bow is held perfectly still, and that the arrow is drawn through the center. Then this is a system that we are left with. Note also that ideally we would be measuring this value at full draw, but that's not realistic, so we will do this with the bow at brace height instead. Considering that this system is fixed in the center with a force being applied sideways, it would be possible for us to rotate the system 90 degrees to take advantage of gravity and still have an equivalent system. Note that what we want to look at is the deflection of the bow tip from its rest position. The more that it deflects when a given weight is applied to it, the less rigid it is. By testing multiple weights on a given bow, we would be able to create a curve showcasing the behavior of the bow under torsional load. We clamp the bows as close to the center as we can by using their fades, which ideally do not twist at all. By clamping it in this manner, we can adjust the tilt of the bow, letting us adjust the bow until it is level. Once the bow is level, we can set up the dial indicator on the tip of the bow. We chose the right-hand side of the upper knock. This was an entirely arbitrary choice, but we started doing this, so we'll carry this through all of our future measurements for consistency's sake. Note that due to the fact that the bow tip is often slippery, we often use a few layers of masking tape on the tip to keep the dial indicator from sliding around. Now we set up our weights. We've chosen to set our weights to be between 3 and 7% of the bow's draw weight at 1% draw weight intervals This lets us get 5 data points and draw a line through them. We hang the weight on the knocking point and wait 15 seconds and note down the reading on the dial indicator. The reasoning for waiting 15 seconds is due to the fact that bows often creep a little, and the value will continue to increase over time. We've chosen 15 seconds as an arbitrary stop point for consistency's sake. From running this experiment with 49 bows, we have successfully obtained data that results in a line of best fit with r squared greater than 0.995 across all 49 samples. If you don't know what this means, it means that the data can be predicted within the range extremely well, at least in the weight range of 3 to 7% of draw weight. We also suspect that at higher weight percentages, this relationship would not hold true. Given this information, we can compare bows by looking at the coefficient of their lines of best fit. The smaller the coefficient, the more torsionally rigid the bow is. Generally speaking, a heavier bow is more torsionally stiff. If we look at an 80-pound daylight monarch and compare it with a 34-pound Mariner Han Wind 1, we see that the monarch is significantly stiffer than the Han Wind. We can also use this data to somewhat validate manufacturer claims. For example, Simon claims that his RX Raptor is extremely stiff, no torsion or twist. And we see that even without normalization, a 34-pound at 28-inch RX Raptor is more torsionally rigid than an 80-pound Daylight Monarch. Also note that draw weight does not actually equal stiffness. If we look at this 101-pound MR tie ring, we see that it is actually not very torsionally stiff at all. It has the second largest maximum deflection out of all tested bows. However, it makes up for this by requiring a force equivalent to 3.2 kilograms applied to it to bring it to its deflection. Are you going to apply 3.2 kg of force sideways to your 100-pound bow? I certainly am not. Note that a flaw in our data is that we did not account for a limb length for the bow. A longer bow has longer limbs, creating a lever that magnifies the amount of force generated at the tip when a force is applied at the center of the bow. However, this data is still useful as a relative measurement to let us talk about the torsional rigidity of bows. If you've made it this far, thank you for seeing through all of that. All of the data discussed can be found on the website asiaticbow.info. And if you have any questions, feel free to leave a comment or contact us via email. Thank you for watching, and see you next time!